The doctor's voice was urgent. Your child needs surgery immediately. My hands trembled as I dialed my husband's number. This was our child, our baby. He had to come. But when he answered, his voice was cold. I can't make it. I'm busy. Busy, my heart pounded. It's an emergency. He needs you. Silence. A muffled voice in the background. A woman's voice. Then the line went dead. I stood there, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzing above me, my son barely clinging to consciousness in the ICU. And my husband? He had made his choice. That night, I learned the truth, and it shattered me more than I ever thought possible. I used to believe in love, the kind that lasts, the kind that fights through storms. When I married Daniel, I thought I had found that love. We built a home, shared dreams, and when our son was born, I thought our bond had grown even stronger. But love doesn't always shatter in a single moment. Sometimes it cracks slowly, piece by piece, until one day you look around and realize it's gone. The first crack was small, a shift in his voice, a new habit of keeping his phone screen turned away, late nights at work that turned into entire weekends. I ignored it at first. Maybe I didn't want to see. Maybe I convinced myself that stress was making him distant. Then came the unexplained absences. Excuses that didn't add up, a perfume scent on his clothes that wasn't mine. I asked him about it once, and he laughed. Hey, you're imagining things, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. But something inside me knew. The real warning came when our son fell sick for the first time, a high fever, endless crying. I called Daniel, my voice shaking, begging him to come home. I'm in a meeting, he said. I'll be there soon. He never showed up. I stayed up all night, holding our son close, whispering to him as his tiny body burned with fever. The next morning, Daniel walked in as if nothing had happened, a faint smile on his lips. How's the little guy? Something in me broke that day. As weeks passed, the distance between us grew. He stopped pretending. He stopped trying. And then one night, he didn't come home at all. I sat in the dark, watching the front door, waiting. When he finally walked in, the smell of another woman clung to him like a secret he no longer cared to hide. Where were you? My voice was barely above a whisper. He shrugged. Out. No lies. No apologies. That was the moment I realized. I was losing him. But I never thought he would choose her over his own child's life. Top of form. Bottom of form. The moment the doctor looked me in the eye, I felt the world shift beneath my feet. Your son needs emergency surgery, he said, his voice steady but urgent. We need consent, and we need it now. I gripped my phone, my hands trembling as I dialed Daniel's number. My heart pounded, my breath shallow. The phone rang, once, twice. Then he picked up. Daniel, I gasped, my voice cracking. Our son, he needs surgery. You need to come, now. Silence. Then a sigh. I can't, he said, his voice detached. I'm busy. I blinked, the words not making sense. Busy? My voice rose. Daniel, this is your son. He could. I'm with her, he said flatly. I've already made plans. A slow, cold horror spread through me. My legs felt weak. My free hand clutched the chair beside me to keep from collapsing. You're choosing her over your son's life? The words barely escaped my lips. She needs me right now, he said, irritation creeping into his voice. Just sign the papers. I'll deal with it later. I couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened around the phone, knuckles white. I wanted to scream, to beg, to make him understand, but I knew. He didn't care. Not about me, not about our son. He had already chosen. And in that moment, I realized something brutal, something undeniable. I was on my own. The surgical lights flickered above as the doctors rushed my son into the operating room. My chest tightened with every second that passed. I stood there, gripping the consent form, my fingers trembling. My child was fighting for his life, and his father, the man who was supposed to protect him, was nowhere to be found. I had called him again and again. Each time, it went to voicemail. Finally, my fingers moved on their own, typing a message. If you don't show up now, don't ever come back. The message was delivered, but no reply. Minutes stretched into hours. The weight of betrayal settled deep in my bones. I couldn't sit. I couldn't breathe. Then, just as the surgeon stepped out, the door to the waiting room swung open. Daniel walked in, unbothered, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, the scent of expensive cologne clinging to him. His eyes barely met mine before he sighed. "Is it done?" he asked, pulling out his phone like this was nothing more than an inconvenience. I stared at him, my blood boiling. The rage inside me, suppressed for far too long, erupted. "Is it done?" My voice shook. "You abandoned your son, and that's all you have to say?" He glanced up, frowning. "I was busy. You know that." I took a step closer, my fists clenched. "With her?" He scoffed. "You're being dramatic." The audacity, the sheer cruelty. I didn't even recognize the man standing in front of me. I had begged, I had cried, I had tried to make him see what he was throwing away. But at this moment, I realized he didn't deserve my son. He didn't deserve us. I reached into my bag, pulling out the envelope I had prepared for weeks, never truly believing I'd have to use it. I shoved it into his hands. "What's this?" he muttered, flipping it open. "Divorce papers." My voice was cold, steady. "You made your choice, Daniel. Now I'm making mine." For the first time, his confidence faltered. "Wait, no." I cut him off. "You weren't here when it mattered, and now you never will be." The weight on my chest lifted as I turned away. My son was my priority now. The past no longer had power over me. And as I walked back toward his hospital room, I knew this was the beginning of something new. The beeping of the heart monitor was steady, rhythmic, almost soothing. My son's tiny hand rested in mine, his breathing calm. The worst was over. He had survived, but I wasn't the same. I sat by his bedside, staring at the divorce papers Daniel had thrown on the hospital floor. He hadn't begged. He hadn't fought. Just a blank stare before turning and walking away. No remorse. No regret. I thought it would break me. But as I looked at my son, I felt nothing but clarity. This wasn't an ending. This was freedom. The following days were a blur, packing what little I could, arranging for a lawyer, cutting off every thread that tied me to the man who had abandoned his family. There were moments when the pain crept in, uninvited. Memories of the life I had built, the love I had given so freely, only to be discarded like an afterthought. But then I would look at my son, his eyes filled with innocence, his laughter untainted by the cruelty of the world. And I knew I had made the right choice. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, my son squeezed my hand. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" I looked into his eyes, the same eyes I had once seen in Daniel, but now they held only love. "Yes, baby," I whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "We're going to be better than okay." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. Sometimes losing someone isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of finding yourself.